The Ghost before the title. Please come, Holy Spirit. Ever wonder why? Chapter 15. Questions, Answers, and Observations. At the end of chapter 14 I said, Jesus said there are only 2 commandments we now have to live by, and how keeping these 2 commandments ensures we keep all of God's 10 commandments. I said it would be answered in chapter 15, and it will be. It'll be answered in the very first question of this chapter. But in the meanwhile, in chapter 11, I also said we all have questions. And it's true, we all do have questions. I've asked God several questions over the years. For example, questions like, why did God make the devil? Why was I born? Who am I? Why is there so much sickness and disease in the world? Why is there so much hunger and poverty? Why is there so much cruelty and sadness? These and many other questions I have petitioned before God. Don't worry, I promise I will try to answer all of these questions, and some questions I will only give observations. But I will answer why God created the devil. Speaking of the devil, have you ever noticed how evil spelt backwards is live, and devil spelt backwards is lived? Yeah, I know, God spelled backwards is dog. And we'll discuss that too. The following are a few questions I have petitioned before God. Why did Jesus say, I am the way, the truth, and the life? What's the easiest thing to do in the world? What's the hardest thing to do in the world? What's the only constant in life? Why is the present called the present? Ever wonder how many ways a person can leave this life? What does everybody want in this life, but nobody has? Ever wonder why good will always triumph over evil? This is easily proven. Okay, here's an easy question for you. I haven't met anyone yet that answers it the same way I do. Ever wonder why there are so many different animate and inanimate objects out there? You know, things like ants, trees, birds, lions, tigers, rocks, fish, minerals, gems, germs, grass, water, earth, air, sky, other planets, stars, and so on and so on. Have you ever really wondered why all those things are out there? Well, I did. So why are they out there? And where does wisdom come from? If you had to define love using only one word other than God, what would that one word be? I've asked this question to countless people as well, and I've never got a satisfactory answer from anybody yet. Let me make that clearer. Whenever I say things like, no satisfactory answers from countless people I've asked, I do not mean to imply that no one else has the same answers that I do. I only mean to say that I haven't met them yet. I'm sure I'm not the only person who has ever received the answers I believe to be from God because they are essentially true. What is the greatest act of love? What is the greatest power of love given to mortals? Why were we born in the flesh? Ever wonder why an orgasm feels so good? Ever wonder why reproduction and waste come out of the front of our body, but only waste comes out of the back? Ever wonder why sex outside of marriage is considered bad? Ever wonder why the sky is above us and the earth beneath us? What is the only unforgivable sin? Why is God spelled backwards dog? Okay, here's a tougher question for you. It was for me. Going back to my very first question I asked of God. Why did God create the devil? Those are just a few of the questions I had for God. So let's get back to question number 1 of this chapter. I said, Jesus said there are only 2 commandments we have to live by, and how keeping these 2 commandments ensures we keep all of God's 10 commandments. I said that it would be answered in the very first question of this chapter. So here is the first question. Why did Jesus say, I am the way, the truth, and the life? Answer. Without the way, there is no going. Without the truth, there is no knowing. Without the life, there is no living. From the book, My Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, Book 3, Chapter 56. We ought to deny ourselves and imitate Christ through bearing the cross. Jesus said to him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by me. John 14:6. Jesus simplified the 10 commandments. He summed them up in 2 commandments. If we keep these 2 simple commandments, the rest of the 10 commandments all just fall into place. You know what the 2 most important commandments are? Number 1, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. Number 2, love your neighbor as yourself. Luke 10:27. By keeping these 2 simple commandments, you will find you will be keeping the other 8 automatically. When you love the Lord your God first above all things, you will have no other gods before the Lord your God. In other words, you will not make or worship false idols. You will not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. You will keep the Sabbath holy. I do not necessarily believe that means attending church or going to confession, unless of course you want to. Even though that is what I was taught as part of my Catholic upbringing, I think and believe all God really asks of us to keep the Sabbath holy is to remember that the Lord our God is holy, and to give him the respect he deserves, even more so on the Sabbath. I do not preach or suggest that you do not attend church or go to confession just because that is my opinion. You do what you want to do. You do what you believe you should do. The Lord rested on the Sabbath. Therefore, we too should rest from our sinning on the Sabbath. We should depart from our evil ways and refrain from sin even more on the Sabbath, thus keeping the Sabbath holy, showing obedience, honor, praise, and glory to the Lord our God. That's how the first commandment of Jesus, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, covers the first 4 commandments of God. Now for the next 6. Jesus' second commandment, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. If you love your neighbor as yourself, you won't harm or envy your neighbor in any way. You will honor your father and your mother, and you will honor your neighbor. You will not kill. You will not commit adultery. You will not steal. You will not bear false witness against your neighbor. You will not covet your neighbor's wife or your neighbor's belongings. And that's how the second commandment of Jesus, you shall love your neighbor as yourself, covers the remaining 6 commandments of God. So you see, you can and you will accomplish obeying all 10 commandments of God just by obeying Jesus' 2 simple commandments. Number 1, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your strength and with all your mind. And number 2, love your neighbor as yourself. Luke 10:27. Jesus also referred to these 2 commandments in response to a question by one of the Pharisees. And one of them, a Pharisee, a doctor of the law, asking him, Jesus, tempting him, Master, which is the greatest commandment in the law? Jesus replied, love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind. This is the first and the greatest commandment, and the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All the law and the prophets hang on these 2 commandments. Matthew 22:35-40. Those who willingly obey Jesus' 2 commandments will automatically obey all of God's 10 commandments. So, the reason Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, is because without the way, there is no going. Without the truth, there is no knowing. And without life, there is no living. Question number 2. What's the easiest thing in the world to do? Answer, making friends with Jesus. Jesus is willing to be everybody's friend, especially us sinners. Jesus said, I came not to call the righteous, but the sinner to repentance. Luke 5:32. And Jesus said, for the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost. Luke 19:10. So Jesus came here looking for us, the lost and the sinners, to be his friend. Therefore, making friends with Jesus is the easiest thing in the world to do. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him may not perish, but may have life everlasting. John 3:16. Question number 3. What's the hardest thing in the world to do? Answer, keeping Jesus as your friend. Many men are called merciful, but who shall find a faithful man? Proverbs 26. It isn't easy keeping Jesus as your friend, folks. Many people who believe they are friends of Jesus are in for a rude awakening. Jesus said, not everyone that says to me, Lord, Lord, shall enter the kingdom of heaven, but he that does the will of my Father, who is in heaven, he shall enter into the kingdom of heaven. Many will say to me in that day, Lord, Lord, have we not prophesied in thy name, and cast out devils in thy name, and done many miracles in thy name? And then I will say unto them, Get thee away from me, I never knew you. Depart from me, you evildoers that work iniquity. Matthew 7:21-23. With all kinds of diversions, distractions, and temptations out there, it is not easy to be like Jesus 24/7. Only Jesus was free from all sin, and only Jesus was able to overcome all the temptations of the world. Notice how I said free from all sin, and not free from all temptations. Even Jesus suffered temptation. Remember, the devil appearing to Jesus as Satan himself tempted Jesus 3 times. The first time, after fasting 40 days and 40 nights in the desert, Satan tempted Jesus by saying, "If you are truly the Son of God, turn these stones into bread." Jesus replied, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes forth from the mouth of God." Matthew 4:3 and 4. The second time, Satan took Jesus to the holy city and had him stand on the highest point of the temple, known as the pinnacle. There, Satan said to Jesus, "If you are truly the Son of God, throw yourself down from here. For it is written, He, God, will command His angels concerning you, and they will lift you up in their hands, so that you will not strike your foot against a stone." Matthew 4:6. The third time, Satan took Jesus to a very high mountain and showed him all the treasures of the kingdoms of the world, with their entire splendor. And Satan said to Jesus, "All this I will give you, if you bow down and worship me." And Jesus replies, "Get thee away from me, Satan. It is written, the Lord your God shall you adore, and Him alone shall you serve." Matthew 4:8-10. If Jesus was tempted by the devil, then so are we all. The only difference is, Jesus did not fall into temptation and give in to the devil's wiles, like we so easily and so often do. Jesus stood his ground, remained firm in his faith, and did not fall into sin. I am certainly not as holy as Jesus, and I am not holier than you either. I am a sinner just like you. Maybe not as sinfully evil as some people, you know, the kind of people I described earlier in my brief description of Satanists. I believe all sins can be forgiven, except one. I also believe there are different degrees of sin. For example, there is a big difference between stealing a bubble gum and committing a murder. Both are wrong, and both are forgivable. But murder definitely affects and hurts more people. Murder has a much bigger and broader impact on people's lives than stealing a bubble gum. Stealing a piece of bubble gum can be replaced or returned. Taking a person's life cannot be replaced or returned. It is final. You can never bring a murdered person back. Here's an interesting piece of trivia. Did you know that the majority of murderers believe they are in the right when they commit the act of murder? There are many reasons people commit murder, none of them good, but murderers have their own ways, their own reasons, and their own excuses for justifying their crime. Jealousy, rage, revenge, greed, love, lust, hatred, anger, bias, bigotry, kicks, psychopathic, sociopathic tendencies, etc., etc. None of them are right, and none of them are justifiable. Though committing the act of murder may seem right and justifiable to the murderer at the time of the murder, it is not, and it never is. Even if you are a parent and you walk in on a maniac brutalizing and murdering your whole family, perhaps you witness your child being slaughtered right in front of you. Most people would probably go through a whole range of emotions, everything from shock and horror to rage and revenge. Some people would probably want to kill the person that murdered their loved ones or child, and probably feel they were in the right to kill the person who murdered their family, and believe it is justified. Maybe they feel the person had it coming, and that he or she got what they deserved. Anger indeed kills the foolish, and envy slays the little one. Job 5:2. Even if they didn't walk in on the act, many would go out and search for the killer with the intention of seeking revenge. Many seek vengeance for much less. It still doesn't make it right. What may seem right in a man's eyes is not necessarily right in God's eyes. Proverbs 14:12. If it is not right in man's laws, how much less then can it be right in God's laws? You cannot take the law into your own hands, and you should never seek revenge. Cease from anger and leave rage. Have no emulation to do evil. Psalms 36:8. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Romans 12:19. I have often thanked the Lord that it is not my place to judge. A person's words, appearance, or acts do not necessarily reveal the true intentions buried deep within their hearts. Only God knows the real reasons for doing whatever it is they do and did. Sometimes people say, even they themselves don't know why they did what they did. Somehow I suspect sometimes they do, but there may be other times that they actually don't. And for that one reason alone, I would not want to be the judge of anyone else. I do not know what is in their heart or what intentions they had. I only know it is not my place to judge, and I thank God for that. One thing I vividly remember from my very early childhood was when I saw my first movie about Jesus' life and crucifixion. I was probably around 3 years old. The other kids were a couple of years older than me, and they laughed every time Jesus was beaten, whipped, and tortured, and then finally crucified. Personally, I cried. I couldn't understand why they would laugh. Here was a man who had done nothing wrong, and yet he was being treated like a criminal. To me, it seemed like Jesus was just being punished for doing nothing wrong. Still others laughed and took pleasure at his demise. Again, I thank God I don't have to judge them either. Question number 4. Apart from God and the devil, good and evil, right and wrong, death and taxes, what is the only constant in life? Answer: change. Isn't that odd? Change is the only real constant in our lives. It seems to me the opposite of something constant is something that is inconstant, or change. Yet there it is. Change is the only real constant in our lives. If you live, breathe, and die, change is guaranteed to occur constantly in our lives. Apart from those other things I mentioned, change is the only real constant that we have in our lives. Everything and everyone is constantly changing. Every second of every minute change is taking place. We all just grew a second older. A child was born, a child died, someone laughed, someone cried, the sun rose, the sun set. There is a very fine line between love and hate, life and death. Some people hate to love, others love to hate. There are those that find true love, and there are those who never find any kind of love at all. There are also those who love the world, and those who don't. There are those who love God, and those who don't. It is one or the other. The choice is ours, and ours alone. No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or he will sustain the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, money, the world. Matthew 6:24. And if a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Mark 3:24 and 25. Which kingdom will you serve? The kingdom of God or the kingdom of mammon, money, the world? It's one or the other. Which one do you love more? If you said mammon, money, the world, then it's a good thing change is the only constant in our lives. It gives every one of us, every second of every minute of every day that we are alive, the opportunity to change our minds and choose the kingdom of God. It is very obvious to me that if change is ever present and always constant in our lives as long as we live and breathe, then it means we all have the opportunity to change our minds and our ways before it's too late. I'm pretty sure we won't be able to change our minds or our ways after we die. Anyway, remember those children I mentioned earlier? The ones that laughed at the torture and murder of Jesus Christ? As it turned out, many years later they changed their minds and their feelings, proving that change provides us with the opportunity, every second of every hour of every day, the ability to change our minds and our ways. Eventually those children admitted they were wrong to laugh, and they felt sorry about it. Over time they changed their minds and their ways, and their views of right and wrong. They now knew and admitted it is wrong to persecute, punish, and kill an innocent person. If those children were strictly evil, this change never would have happened. Since constant change is always around us, the opportunity to change is always present and with us, which gives us hope. How many times have you heard somebody say, or how many times have you said it yourself, I hope to change soon, or I've got to change, or I'm going to change, etc. Lots of people say they are going to change, and they never do. But the opportunity and the hope of change is always there, always with us, and always present. There are a lot of hopelessly evil people in this world. Truly evil people don't care if you are innocent or not. If your persecution, torture, and death serves their agenda, then you will be persecuted, you will be tortured, and you will be put to death without any kind of conscience or remorse from any of these truly evil types of people. Lots of monsters walk among us in the form of human beings. They will never change. The Lord has made all things for himself, the wicked also, for the evil day. Proverbs 16:4. Because the wicked man is reserved for the day of destruction, and he shall be brought to the day of wrath. Job 21:30. For the great day of their wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? Revelation 6:17. For God will not accept any man's person, neither will he stand in awe of any man's greatness. For he made the little and the great, and he has equally care of all. Wisdom 6:8. Because the Lord your God, he is the God of gods, the Lord of lords, a great God, mighty and terrible, who neither accepts any man's person, nor does he take bribes. Deuteronomy 10:17. I would hate to say all the wicked people will never change, because I'm sure some of them eventually will. I hold out hope for all of them. I pray for all of them to change their ways and see the true light. If it be so, they may present their supplication before the Lord, and may return every single one from his wicked way. For great is the wrath and indignation which the Lord has pronounced against the wicked people. Jeremiah 36:7. Thanks to change being the only real constant in our lives, beside God and the devil, good and evil, right and wrong, death and taxes, we all have the opportunity to take advantage of changing our minds and our ways. We all have the opportunity to change our minds about the way we think about God and the value of our soul. We all have the opportunity to change our evil ways, and we all have the opportunity to do so right here and right now. I beg all to change their evil ways before it's too late, and they die in vain. Until we die, the opportunity to change our evil ways is ever present. Question number 5. Have you ever wondered why the present is called the present? Answer: because yesterday is history and tomorrow is a mystery. That's why the present is called the present. Because it is a present, a gift given to us by God. Our present is God's gift given to us to do our best with. Today is our present. It is a free gift. We didn't ask for it, but if we are alive, we've got it. There is no time like the present. Why? Because maybe today is all we have. We must take advantage of our present, our gift of today. It's really quite simple when we understand that every day is a gift. Every day we wake up, we are given God's gift to us of our present, today. We can't bring back yesterday, and who knows if we'll be here tomorrow. When it comes right down to it, tomorrow never comes. Why? Because it's always here. When tomorrow arrives, what does it become? It becomes today. What was once today becomes yesterday, and tomorrow becomes today at the same time. Don't worry, tomorrow will soon enough become yesterday. There is no other day like today, your present day today. Indeed, all men and women set appointments, make plans, and make goals, hoping for future days of tomorrow. But who knows if they will even be alive to see those future days. Their tomorrow might just become someone else's yesterday. Today they died. When tomorrow arrives and becomes today, their planned tomorrow suddenly becomes yesterday for the rest of the living. Time moves on, but not the dead. Time waits for no one. Everyone born dies. Others will say of them, "Oh, they had such great plans and such great ambitions. They had such a bright future ahead of them. They died too soon. Yesterday they were alive. Today they are dead. And tomorrow they are no more." They have no more present. Their gift of today is gone. Yesterday, today, and tomorrow are no more for the dead. Where is their today and tomorrow now? It's in the past, dead and gone. This is another example of why our present is called the present. Because yesterday is history, and tomorrow is a mystery. And our present is a present, a gift given to us from God. Make the best of your present, your gift of today, which you have received from God. Today is called your present for a very good reason. How often have you heard about someone being suddenly taken by death without any warning? They died in a freak accident. They had a sudden heart attack. They were beaten, robbed, and killed. They died in an altercation. They were gunned down. They were stabbed to death. They were murdered by an unknown assailant. They were murdered by somebody they knew. They were struck down by a car. They fell down the stairs. They slipped in the tub. They drowned. They died in a fire. There was a plane crash. They died in a hurricane. They died in an earthquake. They were healthy as a horse and died for no apparent reason. They were hit by lightning, etc., etc. Even if death is not so sudden, tomorrow is still an uncertainty. They were sick for a long time. Their time finally came. The doctors gave them only 6 months to live. They died on the operating table. They never regained consciousness. They were plagued by disease. The sickness ravaged their body. Their brain is dead. They are vegetables. Their brain, their heart, their kidneys, their lungs, their spleen, their central nervous system, or any other built-in life support system stopped functioning. Their appendix burst. They died of old age, etc., etc. We all die. Well, at least our present bodies do. Like I said earlier, there are a million ways to die. There are no guarantees of tomorrow for anyone. Even our present of today is not guaranteed. We might not live through the whole day. Let's face it, it is always someone's today when they die. He or she died today. In other words, our gift of today, our present, will not last forever. As they say, except for God, all good things on earth must come to an end. The bright side of this, of course, is that if all good things on earth must come to an end, then that means all evil things and all bad things on earth must also come to an end, including Satan's reign here on earth. God, Satan, heaven, and hell, and our immortal souls, of course, will carry on and live for all eternity, long after all things on earth have come to an end. That's why we have to take care of our present, our God-given gift of today, people, because today is all we have to protect our eternal soul. Today is the only reason why we were given our present to begin with. The present is very precious. These are the days of salvation. Now is the acceptable time. 2 Corinthians 6:2. It is also a result of why God created the devil, and I will explain that later. It is never too late for us to change our evil ways when we have our present, our gift of today. Maybe that's why change is always constant and ever present in our daily lives. It seems like change is always calling us, ever present in our present. It gives us the opportunity to change our ways every day we have it today. It's too late to change our ways when we have no more todays or yesterdays, which were once our tomorrows, and now they too are dead and gone. It's too late to start thinking about changing our ways to safeguard our soul when our present, our gift from God, is no more. If we don't use our present, our gift from God of today, to safeguard and save our souls from burning in hell, then we had our chance with our present, our gift from God of today, and we blew it. When we die, our today is gone, our yesterday is no more, and our tomorrow is no longer there. Today is the only day that counts. It is our present. The past is the past. Many people say how hard they have struggled in their past to get them to where they are now today in their life. But when their present gift of today is no more, what in reality is their past? It is past. It is no more. No one remembers or speaks of them every day anymore. Not even our loved ones who have passed away are spoken of every single day. Their friends don't talk about them as they once did. They don't show up at work. They're not invited to parties. They don't come to dinner. They are dead and gone. Their possessions have been scattered. Like yesterday and tomorrow, they are no more and no longer there. The only remembrance of them is past memories. Many people say how they are going to change tomorrow. They are going to be a better person. They are going to live a better life. They are going to work harder, study harder, give more and do more for their fellow man, etc., etc. How many people plan for this thing or that thing? Then bang, all of a sudden life comes along and interrupts them in all of their plans. John Lennon said it best when he said, "Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans." I'm pretty sure John Lennon had other plans the day he was gunned down and murdered. He probably also had other plans for his hoped-for tomorrows. Then all of a sudden, life came along and interrupted all of his plans. Without any warning, death came a-calling and snatched away his life. His present is gone. His gift of today is no more, and neither is he. I'm pretty sure he didn't plan on that. At least not on that day, which was one of his todays, the day he died. Like I said, it is always someone's today, the day they die. So don't take today, your present, your gift of life today for granted. Never take any day of your life for granted. Because life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. And you never know when death might come a-calling for you. This reminds me of someone I used to work with. We worked together during the week, and on weekends he was a singer in a rock and roll band. I never caught his act, but I heard from others who had, that he was apparently more of a wannabe than anything else. That's neither here nor there to me. I have never witnessed his performance for myself, so I can't say. Nevertheless, he was an admitted sinner and proud of it. In his own words, he told me he was a superstar and chicks just go crazy for him. He was going to sleep with as many women as he possibly could in every possible manner he could imagine. It didn't matter to him if they were young or old, black or white, fat or thin, single or married, pretty or not. He was just going to consensually rape, plunder, pillage, and ravage every woman he could for as long as he could. I asked if he was worried about catching some sort of disease. He said he wasn't. He also claimed to be a Christian. So I asked him, what about going to hell? He said he wasn't worried about that either. In fact, he flat out claimed it was impossible for him to go to hell because God forgives everything. In his opinion, God was going to forgive him. Instead of restraint or moderation, he said he was going to go out and commit every kind of sin there was, because God forgives everything, right? It was a rhetorical question. I didn't answer. I was too busy thinking to myself, what a foolish man. What may seem right in a man's eyes is not necessarily right in God's eyes. Proverbs 14:12. Besides, who is he to know how God will judge him? He carried on by saying he had plans for changing his ways. His plans for changing his ways, according to him, are: he is going to wait until the very last minute to change. He would say he was sorry to God at the very last minute before he dies, and all his sins would be forgiven. I thought to myself, what an arrogant fool. Who says he is going to have a last minute? His life could end in the split of a second. This is not to say that his life will not pass before his eyes in that split of a second. It probably will. But what he will do with that split of a second, or what happens after it, who knows? Who knows if he will be too afraid to die to remember to apologize to God and to say he was sorry? And who knows if God will forgive him? Only God, not him. My final thought of this discussion with my coworker was the same as my first. I thought to myself, what an arrogant fool this man is. For man indeed proposes, but God disposes. From the book My Imitation of Christ by Thomas à Kempis, Book 1, Chapter 19, The Practices of a Good Religious. I remember one time when I thought I was going to die. I was in the Army Reserves at the time. I was sitting on the rear wheel hump in the back of an Army truck. We were on our way to rifle camp. Suddenly, the truck hit a bump in the road. I was thrown across to the other side of the truck. I remember looking up and seeing my face, heading straight for a solid steel crossmember beam. I ducked my head down to protect my face, and I closed my eyes. I prepared myself to feel an imminent, skull-crushing pain on the top of my head. In that split second, flying across the width of the truck, I saw my life flash before my eyes. To my utter amazement, instead of feeling a bone-smashing pain, which I am very familiar with, as I broke my arm as a child, I felt my head sinking into a very soft, fluffy feeling pillow type of thing. I had no idea what it was or how it could be so soft, since my head was down and my eyes were closed, and the last thing I remembered was seeing my face heading for a solid piece of steel. Realizing I wasn't dead or in any pain, I pulled my head out of this soft pillow-like feeling substance. I looked up and saw that my head had landed in the stomach of the most robust reservist in the back of the truck with us. I hit him with such force, I expected him to be hurt. I asked him if he was okay, and to my surprise, he answered yes he was. This whole incident happened in the blink of an eye. Flying across the width of the truck from start to finish took less than a second. In that split of a second, I saw my life flash before my eyes. It was pretty frightening to see all my sins flash before me. Yet, I was not afraid of dying. I was resigned to die. I was contented to die. I learned two things on that day. The first thing I learned was, I didn't die. The second thing I learned was, I didn't have to die to see my life flash before my eyes. I only had to believe I was going to die. I was amazed to see with what speed my life flashed before my eyes. Yet there it was. And yes, I can tell you, it was all there. In less than a blink of an eye, an incredibly accurate portrait of my whole life was instantly displayed before me and before my eyes. It was like watching a high-speed movie show. All my sins compressed and condensed into individual little clips. Seeing all my sins flash before my eyes in the blink of an eye only reinforced what I already knew. And that is, yesterday is history, and tomorrow is a mystery. And the present is called the present because the present is a present, a gift from God to all of us. Question number 6. How many ways can a person leave this life? Answer: 2. There are a million ways we can die, but only 2 ways that anyone ever leaves this planet. Number 1, you leave in peace. Number 2, you leave in fear. These are the only 2 ways a person can leave this planet. People are either peaceful, happy, and contented, or they are afraid, terrified, and tormented. I have seen both. The first time I actually witnessed someone about to die was when my grandmother was being wheeled out on a stretcher by ambulance attendants. She was a holy woman, God rest her soul. She was always saying her prayers, day in and day out. I'll never forget the day the ambulance attendants took her away. I didn't see any dark shadows surrounding her. There was more of a light around her. I had no idea she was going to die that day, although she did. But I do remember her reaching her hand out to me from the stretcher. With a twinkling light in her eyes and a smile on her face, she held my hand and said to me, "I'll see you on the other side." Then she gently rubbed my arm and said, "Be good and look after your mother." That was the last time I ever saw her. She had such a remarkable look of peace and calm on her face. I would call it appreciative anticipation. She knew she was going home to heaven that day. I sensed she didn't expect to be coming back when she said, "I'll see you on the other side." Talk about faith and confidence. No goodbyes, no bye-bye, just "I'll see you on the other side." I believed her, as she had never lied to me before. Her countenance was magnificent, radiating her readiness to leave this mortal life behind her. There was a complete air of faith, contentment, certainty, peace, and confidence about her. It was really a beautiful spectacle, and a truly unforgettable sight to behold. It is still a choice memory I treasure to this day. I felt sad for her, but her demeanor made me feel happy. She looked ecstatic, like she had been waiting for this moment for her whole lifetime. She wanted it. She was prepared for it. She was positively relieved her time had finally arrived. I missed that woman. I first gained the knowledge of people can leave this life in peace and contentment when I witnessed and observed my grandmother's departure. I also learned a lot from my grandmother when she was alive. I'm sure in certain situations throughout my lifetime, some supernatural spiritual influences can be attributed to her. I'll mention some later. Now for the second way to leave this planet. I have also witnessed and observed the shadow of death encompassing people. When death's presence is lurking, it doesn't necessarily mean someone is going to die instantly. But every time I have seen death's shadow surround a person, the person always dies within the year. I saw a death shadow surrounding my brother's pregnant wife while she was sitting in my grandmother's rocking chair. This, in my view, was just a coincidence, and it had nothing to do with my grandmother's supernatural influences. However, I was told at that moment by that little voice in my head, my oldest brother and his wife's firstborn child would die if his wife did not stop drinking milk. I had to wrestle with my conscience for months. Was telling this to my brother the right thing to do? My first thought was, who am I to tell him such a horrible thing? How could I say something like that to him? Why should he believe me? I had a hard time believing it myself. How did I know for sure if I was right or wrong? I don't know how I knew. I just knew. I knew 100%. I knew my brother's firstborn child would die if his wife didn't stop drinking milk. That little voice in my head told me it was going to happen. After convincing myself, right or wrong, I determined it was better to tell him than not. So I decided to tell him. If I was wrong, then nothing is lost. If I was right, which I believe I was, well then at least I did my brotherly duty. I warned him, and now I have a clear conscience. If I had not told him, I would have felt guilty, and I would have had to live with that the rest of my life. It was up to him whether or not he wanted to believe me. Needless to say, he didn't. Instead, he got very angry and began to lay into me, saying stuff like, "Who the hell are you to tell me something like that? How the hell would you know? You're not a doctor. You're not our pediatrician. We're strictly following our doctor's regime. We're doing everything the doctor orders, according to the letter. Mind your own damn business and get the hell out of here." That was pretty much what I expected him to say. I probably wouldn't have believed me either if I had been in his shoes. It's not something you want to hear, much less believe. As it turned out, he didn't listen to me, and his firstborn baby died at birth. Apart from the formal condolences at the baby's funeral, we never spoke to each other for a long time after that. There was no "I told you so," there was no "you should have listened to me." No, instead I kind of regretted telling him because of the animosity it caused between us. But I had to tell him, as it was the right thing to do. I did my job, as his brother. I warned him. I did my duty. I told him how I felt and what I believed. The whole time during the pregnancy, I was hoping I was wrong, but I wasn't. I don't know, but I believe the baby died peacefully, as the baby never lived outside the womb. Another time I saw the shadow of death surround someone I knew was when I observed the shadow of death surrounding an ex-girlfriend's father. We were about 3 or 4 years into the relationship when I saw and observed the shadow of death surrounding her father. And that little voice in my head said to me, "This man is going to die in 6 months." I thought that was nuts. Her father was a very healthy, jolly, robust man. I got to know him quite well and I liked him. Again, I had to wrestle with my conscience. Should I tell her or not? I decided, right or wrong, I had to tell her. I told her as gently as I could, "Your father is going to die 6 months from now." Again, this caused animosity. She got very angry at me and basically told me to F off. She said my father is as healthy as a horse and there is nothing wrong with him. I said I know, but in 6 months from now, he is going to be dead. Needless to say, she didn't believe me either. She carried on just like my brother did. "How the hell would you know? You're not a doctor," etc., etc. I said, "Don't ask me how I know. I just know." Things were never quite the same after that. We still hung out together for the time being, and within 3 months of me telling her her father was going to die, her father became completely helpless and an absolute invalid, confined to a wheelchair. He couldn't feed himself, bathe himself, write his name, or perform any other routine daily function. He became totally dependent upon a 24-hour nurse and others to facilitate his daily needs. The only bodily function he had left intact was his brain. At least he was spared that for good reason, I discovered later. Again, there was no "I told you so," and there was no "now do you believe me" or anything like that. In the 5th month after I told her what I had to tell her, her father had to be hospitalized. I went to visit him in the hospital a few times. Every time I visited him, I could see nothing but fear and anguish. Sheer terror was in his eyes. Witnessing the terror in his eyes and observing the torment in his heart, mind, and soul, I started to sense there was something terribly wrong in their family. None of the kids went to visit him on a regular basis. I asked my then girlfriend what was up with that. I was told to butt out. I decided to carry on visiting her father, and on one of my later visits I observed the pain in his heart and soul was much worse than I had first suspected. I could see real fear and real pain in his eyes. Not the physical kind of pain, but the spiritual type. I could see he didn't have too much time left. I felt sorry for him. An abundant amount of growing torment was eating him alive. It was as plain as the nose on his face. There was something that was really troubling him. Every time I visited, I could see the terror and the torment getting worse. I tried to ask him what it was. He wouldn't tell me. I already knew. He felt guilty about something and was seeking forgiveness. I said to him, "I can see you're very sorry for some of the things you have done. I also know it has something to do with your kids. Otherwise, they would be here visiting you on an everyday basis." I knew he hadn't made peace with whatever was troubling his soul. I also knew from prior conversations with him while he was full of health and full of life that he left me unsure as to whether or not he believed in God. He also never acknowledged or gave me any indication that he believed he had an immortal soul. But now on his deathbed, it was obvious he was beginning to fear he did. He looked like he didn't know what to do about it. I tried to convince him that God is real, and so is his soul. I told him, the truth is, you really should start believing in God and his infinite mercy. Ask for and get God's forgiveness now while you can, even if you can't get it from your children. You are reflecting on some of the wrong and bad things you have done in your life, and you regret your children may not have forgiven you. Right now, God's forgiveness is much more important. Tell God you are sorry for your sins. You are also beginning to fear you have a soul. You are beginning to ask yourself, what if you do have one? What's in store for you? I told him, I think you already know, and it terrifies you. When that last moment arrives, every one of us will naturally begin to have quite a different opinion of the life we led, that we now realize is entirely past. Most of us will very much regret that we were so careless and remiss with our lives. It's a guilty conscience that makes some of us afraid of dying. He still had doubt, and he didn't really want to believe me. I told him, whatever it is that is troubling you and making you feel guilty, you should resolve it before you die. I said to him, whomever you feel you have offended, including God, you should confess your sorrow and your sins to them. You do feel sorry for your sins, don't you? He didn't answer me, so I went on to say, you should express true remorse and ask for theirs and God's forgiveness. You do feel remorseful, don't you? Again, he didn't answer me, so I continued to say, then tell them how sorry you are for hurting them, and sincerely ask for their forgiveness. It is irrelevant if they are here or not, nor does it matter if they do or don't forgive you. At least you asked. God's forgiveness is what really counts. This only made him more afraid, and he still didn't answer me. When I determined he was down to his last days, I finally convinced a couple of his kids to go and see him. I told him something deep down inside was really bothering him. I told him he would not die in peace if he did not unburden himself of his troubles and obtain forgiveness. So they went to see him. I asked my then girlfriend if everything went okay. Unfortunately, nothing was resolved. According to her, he was still the same stubborn man that he always was. He didn't apologize for anything or sincerely ask for forgiveness. I went to see him the following day, and he looked even more filled with fear. It was apparent he felt like he had made a mistake, not apologizing and begging for forgiveness. I guess maybe he was too scared or too proud to beg. Maybe he felt like he did nothing wrong or thought that it wasn't his fault. Other than feeling guilty and scared, I don't know what he thought. I asked him what happened. He wouldn't tell me anything. I don't blame him. Maybe it was too private or too personal. I didn't push him for an answer. He gave me the impression it was none of my business. I told his daughter to go back and see him again, as he only had a day or two left. Sad to say, but the last time I saw him, he was definitely going to die in torment and scared out of his wits. While I was reserving him in his fear, I recalled the choice memory that I treasure of my grandmother's preparedness to die. The spectacular vision of her countenance came to mind, how happy and peaceful she looked, compared to how terrified and fearful this man looked. His departing countenance was the absolute opposite of hers. He was not at all prepared to die. He was full of fear and terrified of something. It seemed pretty obvious to me that this man was going to die in turmoil, torment, and torture. That's when I realized there are a million ways to die, but there are only two ways that anyone can leave this life. Number one, you either die in peace, or number two, you die in fear. You either die with a clean conscience, or you die with a guilty conscience. The choice is yours. For our glory is this, the testimony of our conscience, that in simplicity of heart and sincerity of God, and not in carnal wisdom, but in the grace of God, we have conversed in this world, and more abundantly towards you. 2 Corinthians 1:12. I have also seen several other people on the brink of death. The majority I've seen look scared. They are either scared of dying, or scared of what awaits them. 9 times out of 10, if not 10 times out of 10, it's a guilty conscience that makes them afraid. Some put on this big brave act, but you can see deep down inside they are extremely uncomfortable and very afraid. They are not prepared to die and meet their maker. If they don't believe they have a maker, then they are probably even more afraid of the unknown. They don't know and are very unsure of what awaits them. Though by this time I believe they have a pretty good idea of what to expect, and that terrifies them too. All of a sudden they begin to consider what awaits them. Their doubts and uncertainties only add fuel to the fire and feeds the fears raging within them. This fear of unbelievers consumes them unto their death. If they had a good conscience, they would not fear death very much. It is better to avoid sin than to fear death. Daniel 13:23. If you are not prepared to die today, how will you be prepared to die tomorrow? Tomorrow is an uncertain day. How do you know you will have a tomorrow? James 4:14. People who fear death have no faith or belief in God. They might think or feel it's too late for God to forgive them. They might be like the man I just described, too stubborn to ask for forgiveness, too proud to beg for mercy, too afraid or so ignorant they believe they are blameless. They believe they've done nothing wrong. They're not at fault, so there's nothing to forgive. The devil wants to keep them believing it's too late for them. The devil wants them to believe they are unworthy of forgiveness, or they have done no wrong, therefore they have nothing to forgive. The devil wants them to believe right up to the end of their life that there is no God. That's just the devil deceiving them one last time for the last time. The fool said in his heart, "There is no God." Psalms 52:1. On one side they have the devil telling them they have no need of forgiveness. On the other side they have God telling them they do. Why do so many people so easily believe the lies of the devil and not the truth of God? Why? I believe it is because fools despise wisdom and instruction. Proverbs 1:7. If they don't repent and ask for God's forgiveness, they are fools. The senseless man shall not know, or will the fool understand these things? Psalms 91:7. They have no knowledge of God's love and willingness to forgive. Even children of the devil, who are as evil can be, know that God is real. Whatever the case may be, I'm pretty sure they have no confidence in their own ability or power to save themselves from whatever fate awaits them. On their deathbeds, non-believers must feel totally hopeless and helpless. The question of, what if, must prey on their minds. What if God is real? What if I'm condemned to hell and Satan is my final destination? What if there is life after death? I believe that's why that dying man in the hospital was left with only his brain intact. He was conscious of the fact he only had one remaining option to help himself, and he was given one last chance to change. From what I gathered, I don't know, but I don't think he ever took advantage of it. I don't know for sure because I wasn't there when he actually died. Without belief or faith in God, people can only imagine the worst. I'd be willing to bet whatever people imagine the worst to be doesn't even come close to what the worst can truly be. If hell and Satan is their final destination, unimaginable, unending pain and merciless torture awaits them. That's another advantage of having faith and belief in God. There are no what-ifs. There is no fear of the unknown. There is nothing left to the imagination. You know exactly what to expect and what awaits you. With faith, you know and believe you are going to meet God, your Maker. You are ready, prepared, and confident. You yearn for the reunion. The difference between departing this life in peace and departing this life in fear is comparable to the difference between light and dark. There is peace in the light, and there is fear in the dark. No man rejoices or dies securely unless he has within him the testimony of a good conscience. 2 Corinthians 1:12. This is why I do not believe the ignorant and the non-believers have a great deal of confidence on their deathbeds, even if they appear to. I'm pretty sure inside themselves they are terrified of what awaits them. Again, this is another decision or choice we all have available to us. Do we want to die in peace, or do we want to die in fear? I believe the difference between my grandmother dying in peace with a smile on her face and a twinkle in her eye, and my then-girlfriend's father dying in fear, with pain on his face and terror in his eye, is the fact that my grandmother believed in God and knew what awaited her. Whereas my then-girlfriend's father did not believe in God and did not know what awaited him. On their deathbeds, their countenances were exactly the opposite of each other. One believed in God, one didn't. One died in peace, one died in fear. One died with a clean conscience, one died with a guilty conscience. Which way do you want to die? Do you want to die believing in God, or do you want to die not believing in God? Do you want to die in peace, or do you want to die in fear? Do you want to die with a clean conscience, or do you want to die with a guilty conscience? Like I said earlier, there are a million ways to die, but there are only two ways anyone ever leaves this planet. Which way do you want to go? In peace or in fear? Choose wisely. The choice is yours. End of chapter 15. All honor and glory to God. Coming next, chapter 16. More questions, answers, and observations. Until then, remember, the devil is stalking you, and God is calling you.